My name is Jannette Barrett, aka Miss Lyricist B. And by profession, I am a retired psychiatric nurse, but I'm currently working as a mental health freelance practitioner in my local community. I decided to retire from psychiatric nursing in the hospital forum, the NHS, because I didn't believe that my people were being met with their mental health needs. Even more paramount now is we're still within the pandemic, that I've been inundated with more and more work on a one-to-one basis. And the fact that I cover all ages, I have been inundated with work. But I also am an actor, a singer-songwriter, a performance poet, a dancer, choreographer, and I'm a script and playwright. So when I deliver my bespoke mental health practice to individuals on a one-to-one basis, mainly within their own homes to try and prevent them from going into secured units or being sectioned, I use the arts, because I think that's one of the things that helps to promote what's inside them, their passions. And once their passions are rooted out, they can begin to live as they want to live and not find excuses with themselves or be labeled by society. So that's really my background. I'm also a mother, a wife of over 30 years, and grandmother. My youngest is 27, and I have a granddaughter of 20. So there I am. I am a mature woman. I have a series called the Transition Series. And the reason why I called my autobiographical trilogy the Transition Series is because it starts from the age of 2 and goes to the present day. My last book, which is called Cries from Their Cells, When Walking on Forgiveness Road, is because my first 2 books in the autobiography is all to do with cultural silences, which I'm sure a lot of you can resonate with, and the fact that I was abused from the age of 2 by a family member. Say no more on that. As it started from the age of 2, I want you to think about a 2-year-old child, or perhaps yourself as a 2-year-old child. When you're just beginning to find yourself, you would mimic everything, sponge everything up. At the same time, you're starting to find that independence in your spirit. So at that age, for you to be abused by a family member, an uncle, who is 6'4", 6'5", and you're no more than 2 foot tall. You're in a family of 7 siblings. You are the 6th one. You're 2 years old. This happens to you. The other siblings go off to school. But not only does this happen to you, you find within this independent streak that you're beginning to form that you have to protect an 11-month-old sibling, your sister, who has autism. So not only is your uncle doing it to you, he's also trying to do it to your baby sister. So what do? You go in front of her and you protect her. This is how I began to become a carer without knowing that I was a carer. So I was a young carer through all of my life in school. Because of her being 11 months younger than me, I'm a September child, she's an August child. And in the UK, the school year starts in September. So right the way through school, and I'm a child of the 60s, early 60s, I've gone to school. This is happening to me. I'm protecting my sister who has autism. She did not go to a special school because both my parents were ill. My mother had cancer, had a mastectomy. We found ourselves as a family looking after mother and then later on looking after father after he had a stroke. But let me just concentrate that scene as a 2-year-old, going through those things when the other siblings went to school, left inside of the house with this uncle doing these things because mother at that time was still going to work. And father, who was born in 1909, by the way, was already semi-retired. So he's laid back, not seeing what was going on. Because of cultural silences, these things are not spoken of. I believe mother knew, but didn't know what to do because she still had to go to work and make ends meet. I believe that shame and disgrace was something that you couldn't speak of. Also, if I had spoken out in school what was going on and that I couldn't cope, or the rest of the family couldn't cope, would they have split us up? Because in them days, if anyone spoke, then they would split the family up anyway. Social services would come in, or some kind of service would come in and split the family up, especially if they didn't think that the parents could cope or any of the siblings would cope. So it wasn't going to come from my lips that we as a family were not coping with what was going on. Secondly, you respected your elders. They were Mr. or Mrs. or uncle or auntie. Therefore, it was forbidden for you to speak of these kind of practices. And also, how would I know that there was anything particularly wrong with what was happening? I had no comparison. I didn't go into another person's home and be with their family to know that there was a difference. The other thing on top of this transitioning that I'm speaking about is the fact that discipline was done via a stick, a slipper, a piece of twig, a pot lid, or anything like that. Discipline was done by force, and you were just left to take the discipline. Now, my siblings and I, there's one brother who was the eldest, and he decided to slip himself up into the Navy to get away from all this. And then there were all these us girls who were beaten and driven with discipline just as much as it would be if they were boys or even older people. And I believe that came from or stemmed from the fact that my father was born in 1909. So he had witnessed from his grandparents things of slavery that we all know about. Secondly, I believe, and I forced myself to believe this because my father and my mother died over 36 years ago. I forced myself to believe this. This is the only way I could digest the beatings that I endured, was the fact that they didn't know anything better or wasn't taught anything better. And also, I believe that my father wanted us to be as resilient as possible. That if anyone struck us, raped us, or anything else, we could stand up and take it and then shut up, as they did. Not make a fuss, not split the family up, not let anyone else know, but just suck it up and take it. So I lived with these things in my childhood, through school, and into my adulthood when I got married. I did not know what love was or how it's supposed to be. So my first book in this transition series is called They Never Saw Me, Triumphant Through My Early Years. And I believe that me as an individual got swallowed up and covered over because of the responsibilities I had towards my sister and for the things I had to endure. My second book, which is my teenage years up until the age of 30, is called I Don't Know Who I Am. Now, I'm sure many of you can resonate with the teenage years and the peer pressure and the bullying and all of these different things, if you were ever growing up through the 60s and early 70s into the brink of the 80s, when there was so much changes in society, so much growing, so much branching out. Women were still on the back burner, and it was the man's world. And then there was corporal punishments in our schools. We were caned at school, beaten at home, caned at school, beaten at home. So all of this transitioning was something hard for me to swallow, something hard for me to understand. So I wrote about it. I put things down on bits of paper, napkins, diaries, journals, and I boxed them up. The details I put somewhere else. The intricate details of the abuse I put somewhere else. I hid it in an ottoman on maths paper or screwed up into a shoebox, and I placed it in the ottoman underneath some blankets. That bit, even though I had to write it down, I couldn't let anyone else know this. This was an innermost depth of shame and pain that I couldn't understand and couldn't deal with. But the only way for me to let it out was to put it down and hide it. And I thought, okay, I've let it out, I've eased some of it out, but no, under no circumstances would anyone see it until I reached the age of 50. My last child left home. I'm left with my husband, and a new relationship with my husband began. Because there's no children to fall back on. There's no children for me to make an excuse of, oh, I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to do that. So the intimacy of courtship came back into play. And then things of my past started to magnify in my head. These things that happened to me came to the surface, and my husband couldn't understand my frigid manner. And I had to find a way to say, okay, these things have happened. And I had to spill it all out to my husband. Then I had to regrow my relationship. And I thought, if I spill this out to my husband, he's going to have to digest that and see my transition of all what I went through in my life. And who is this wife, this woman that he married? Who is she really? Therefore, the book was called I Don't Know Who I Am. Before I married my current husband, I went in a period of domestic violence. Because I left home, because of everything what was happened, as soon as I was old enough to sort of say to myself, I'm not going to take any more of this beating. If I take any more, I'm going to do something about it. There's under no circumstances could I strike my father or say anything to my mother when they were ill. So I had to leave. So I fell into the arms of an abusive partner. And I still didn't know that he was abusive to me because I had no comparison. I just thought men acted that way. So it wasn't until my current husband that showed me that men don't behave like that. Men don't speak like that. Women shouldn't be treated like that, when I began to find out exactly who Jannette Barrett really is. And that comes to my last book, what's called Cries from Their Cells When Walking on Forgiveness Road. I started to go into the prisons. The first prison that God gifted me with to visit, and I say God gifted me with, was the same prison that my abusive ex-husband was in. And I had to come face to face with not only him, but with others that abused their partners and done all sorts of different things along the way, sit face to face. As a retired psychiatric nurse, I didn't know, first of all, that he was in there. And then there it was. Not only at the beginning did I speak with him, and I had to learn how to regurgitate all that had happened, but also speak with others. And surprisingly enough, why I say God gifted me with this, I wasn't taken aback. I had already learned, because of my husband, how to address people and to know that children aren't born that way. Everything that happened to me, I could have retaliated in my life. I could have become the biggest bully, a narcissist person, because I was so bitter and angry and confused with what had happened in my life. I could have retaliated. So I had to say to myself, did he also have something like that in his life to make him turn out that way? Were his parents like that with him because of the same generation? So I had to say, make up scenarios in my head to give me peace to regurgitate this maggot infesting hatred and poison that I was living with, that was eating me alive. So I had to dissect, analyze, and then speak. So this last book that I've done and this journey walking on forgiveness road is my answer to the fact that no matter what happens in your life, no matter how it makes you feel, I believe, and I have to believe, this is the only way I can continue my life, that there is a valid reason behind it. There must be a valid reason behind it, because no child is born evil. Like the 2-year-old, I first said I was carefree and okay until my husband abused me, until I had to start looking after my autistic sister and protect her, until I was bullied at school because of her, until I went into a domestic violent relationship, and then found a comparison with my current and most wonderful husband. Now, as time is getting along, I'm going to read you something from the book. It's a small caption. And this is how I started. The back cover says, "As I held my pen in the tightest grip, it became my sword once again when writing about my symbolic walk on Forgiveness Road. I chose to open my heart and my ears to actively hear the cries of others. And in doing so, I heard my own cries echoing back at me, so was forced to listen and release them from the cell I locked them into. I thought that once I told my story, I would feel free. I did to some extent, but I was still very bitter. We can convince ourselves that it is better to lock away hurts, but in doing so, our hurts stay. Forgiveness was the key to my internal cell, and I'm no longer crying out from within it." A bit more. When you care for another human being, which has been my life's work as a nurse, whether in an intimate way or as an advocate, such as a counselor or mentor, a special bond is formed. Within that connection, an immense level of trust is built, and often a deep sense of respect. Writing my autobiography whilst caring for others has helped me care for myself. It's been an intriguing revelation. This final book of my autobiographical trilogy depicts how I've been finding out who Jannette Barrett really is, because I finally feel free enough to do so. The thing that intrigued me most about myself was when I dared to step into the secure units to try and seek answers into my ex's behavior towards me, whilst I analysed the men's conduct when they told me their stories. I'd already come to the conclusion that in order for me to move forward with my life properly, I had to learn to forgive my ex. So listening and watching those men was invaluable. Talking with the men, therefore, became a very educational experience indeed, not at all what I had braced myself for. After all that I'd been through with my ex, I expected to come away with some feelings of contempt. But I was using my senses accordingly, and my mind was open. So I felt no judgment after hearing the cries from their cells. Thank you.